Hello, everybody. It's Michael Harbridge coming to you live from central Wisconsin, where it is freezing cold. And I know a lot of you are dealing with cold temperatures, and a lot of you are dealing with snow and stuff right now. So I hope everybody is safe. Today, we're going to be talking, this morning in the first live, we're going to be talking all about underglazes. And we're going to talk about easy strokes, fundamental underglazes, and designer liner. And I'll explain the differences between those products, kind of explain how they're used, best applications, how they can work together, how they work with low fire, how they work with higher temperatures, and just kind of a basic understanding. I'm going to show you several things that you can do with fundamental underglazes, designer liner, easy strokes. We'll talk a little bit about engobes and things that we can do with that. If you are joining us for the live, feel free to comment where you're from and let us know, because what we're going to do is at the end of the live today, we're going to pick one name with a random selection, and that person will win a set of all these different products to play around with. If you're domestic, we will ship that kit to you. If you are an international customer, we will send you a certificate that you can use with one of your suppliers to get those free products. So if you guys have questions, please try to save those till the end. I'm here alone today doing the live, and I will watch for questions. And if you see people putting questions in before I get to the point where I say, okay, ask your questions, if you guys could help out too and just let them know, because some people tune in a few minutes after I say this and don't realize that. So just let them know that I'll get to questions toward the end of the live. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, I have so many samples here, it's kind of crazy. Fundamental underglazes are a product that Mayco has had, one of the original products back in the 1950s. It's a clay-based product, and I'm going to show several different things that you can do with those products. Tonight we're going to have an additional live where I will talk about and demonstrate banding techniques and airbrushing and things, but these are some samples that are done with fundamentals. Things like the fine line banding and the speckling that you see on here is done with the easy stroke. This is another example of banding using the fundamentals and the easy strokes together. You can do banding just with easy strokes. These are pieces that were done just using easy strokes. And I'll explain all the differences between these colors, because that's part of the confusion when people are like, I'm not sure what to use when I'm doing certain techniques. We'll also be talking about designer liner. These are some methods of banding using designer liner right from the writer bottle, but they have so many other uses. Engobes and easy strokes can also be combined together. So we're going to talk about all these things today. Some of them we'll talk about this morning, some of them we'll talk about this evening. So I'm going to flip the camera down, and we're going to start out with the fundamental underglazes. And last night I decided to do a few more pieces and stick them in the kiln. And I want to explain something kind of silly that I did. And one of the reasons I don't like to fire clay in the kiln with glaze pieces. I had a slab of clay that I had rolled out and did some design work on it and did some carving and then clear glazed it. And that piece of clay blew up in the kiln. And guess what? All of those glazed pieces stuck to other pieces in the kiln. Now, a lot of colors are capable of being used on clay. And as long as that clay is generally dry and the clay has been compressed and you don't have air pockets in there, you shouldn't have trouble with that clay blowing up. But the silly thing that I did, and I used a word other than silly, was that slab of clay was a bunch of scraps of clay that I had, and I just made them into a ball, and then I flattened it out. And I had done that a couple months ago, and I just used it in one of the other lives to demonstrate silk screens on clay. And that piece was sitting there, and I was like, you know what? I can just put some underglaze over that, and I can carve through it, and I can fire it, and it'll be fine. Well, I hadn't compressed that clay. I hadn't wedged that clay. While I believe it was dry, there probably were some major air pockets in there. And once I introduced that glaze and underglaze on the surface, it probably added a little moisture, and that piece blew up in the kiln. And I have a lot of pieces that have chunks stuck to it because that clay had glaze on it. So whenever if you do fire clay with glaze on it, just be really careful with that because that is a risk that you do take. And generally I don't. And I thought, oh, I can do this. It'll be fine. So, but you learn from it and you remember those things. So the first things I want to show you with fundamental underglazes, and we're going to be working with the jet black, the UG50. We're working with the orange, the UG204, the UG046 bright yellow, and the UG206 bright red. So fundamental underglazes, what are they? They are colored slip or colored clay. So if you think about when you use a fundamental underglaze, you're brushing on coats of clay. Clay is generally opaque, but if you only brush one coat on, you're going to get kind of a translucent effect, kind of a streaky look. And this is at low fire temperatures and higher temperatures in the stoneware range. But 3 coats generally give you solid coverage. 1 to 2 coats will give you more of a translucent look, but a lot of times with the fundamentals, they kind of, with 2 coats, they kind of look streaky or blotchy. They're not always real smooth. You tend to see brush marks and things in them. So most artists will use them to just do opaque coverage. When you're doing something and you're worried about the glaze possibly running or moving, that's where fundamentals are a great option because I can take fundamental underglaze, and if I just want solid coverage, I can take and I can brush 3 coats of that on, and that color is going to stay put. It's not going to move. It's not going to flow. When you put 2 colors next to one another, they don't bleed into one another. They don't run into one another. They don't fuzz. They keep very, very crisp lines. And that's probably the most common use with the fundamental underglazes. Now, they fire out, though, dull, because if you think about what they are colored slip or clay. So on this vase, I didn't put any clear glaze on this piece. You can see here where I did some black stroke and coat, I got a little bit of a glossiness over it. But generally, because they are colored clay or slip, they fire out porous if you do not put a clear glaze or some type of a glaze over the top of them. And on earthenware pieces, you can do this for decorative purposes. If you don't put a clear glaze over it. If it's something that you want to come into contact with food or a mug where your lips are going to touch it, you definitely need to clear glaze them. On decorative pieces, you can get this real porous finish and leave that like that. On stoneware, if it's an area where your lips are going to come into contact or food is going to be on there, even if you vitrify that clay, those areas where food or your mouth is going to come into contact with, you definitely want to have those areas clear glazed. If the clay body that you're working with goes and is taken and fired properly to vitrification, you can use the fundamental underglazes on stoneware, and they will not absorb moisture because that clay body is vitrified and the underglaze will vitrify. Still want to have it clear glazed in areas where your lips are going to come into contact, or any other food or dinnerware food safe glaze in those areas where food is going to come into contact. The bottoms of pieces, because in earthenware, this is porous and it's not a gloss glaze or what's called a fritted glaze. It won't stick to your kiln shelves. In a stoneware firing, certain colors do tend to flux a little bit, and they will tend to get a little bit glossy, and some of them can stick. One of the colors I know that can do that at like cone 5, cone 6, starting at those temperatures, is the jet black. That does tend to flux a little bit, and it can stick. But on low fire temperatures, you don't have to worry about that at all. And I'll talk about engobes in a minute and why they are a good option for stoneware if you want black on the bottoms of your pieces. But the fundamental underglazes by themselves fire out dull and porous because they are clay. And if you think about that when you're working with those colors and people ask, do I need to clear glaze it? Do I not need to clear glaze it? Is it dinnerware safe? Is it food safe? When all those questions come up, you need to think about what that product is and what temperature you're firing it to and what use you're going to have for these pieces. So I can take and I can brush 3 coats on, get solid coverage. I can also take and I can apply these colors, and I'm going to do some orange and some yellow. And while this orange is still wet, I can take, and I'm going to try to get most of that orange out of the brush and I don't have to wash it out. I'm going to scoop up some of this yellow and I'm going to brush it and slightly overlap that orange. And I can take and I can create a blend of yellow to orange with that color. And that's what I did on the background of this piece. I actually did yellow and I did red from the top, and where they overlapped in the middle, I got more of an orange color in between where they met up. So the colors can be blended. I could also take 2 colors and mix them together. All of the fundamental underglazes are intermixable, so you can mix them to create other colors. You know, things like red and yellow are going to give you a shade of orange. Now, how much yellow do I add versus how much red to get the right shade of orange? You got to kind of play around with it because the colors fire out a little bit different, especially if you add clear glaze to them. When they fire out without clear glaze, you know, that yellow is pretty close to the yellow that I've got here. And I don't have the orange on here, but the orange would be pretty close. But once you add a clear glaze to it, those colors intensify. So you'll see on the Mayco chip charts, you'll see in our color guides where it shows the tile split. And one half is usually darker or brighter than the other half. One half is showing it unglazed. The other half of that tile is showing it with clear glaze on top of it. Now, I can play around with this, which is going to take me into the next technique that I'm going to show. I can play around with adding colors, either blending them like this or just doing a random application of colors on a surface so that the whole surface is covered. And I've got a tile here that's already prepped for that. And so this tile has dried, and I'm going to take and I'm going to apply the jet black over this tile. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a sgraffito technique, and I'm going to apply 2 to 3 coats of the black. The color in the background, I applied 1 generous coat just randomly of the yellow, the red, and the orange that I showed you. And I'm going to apply 2 coats of the black. The black is pretty intense, and I know on this technique I can get away with 2 coats and it will work great. So I'm going to kind of set this aside to dry, and I'm going to go to another piece that I have here that's already prepped with the Fundamentals black underglaze. And this is another clay piece that I just had. It was a very crude slab of clay, and I put 2 coats of the Fundamentals black on here. If I was going to be taking it to higher temperatures in the stoneware range, I probably would do 3 coats on here just to make sure that I have really solid coverage. So this underglaze has dried, and I'm using a carving tool, and there's lots of different tools out there for doing sgraffito work. This is one that Royal makes, and I think Kemper has one similar to this, that it has kind of a spear shape on the end for carving. Zem tools, there's a lot of other great carving tools and tools you can use for sgraffito. I know that I can't think of the name of the company now, that they're in California and they make all kinds of cool, really nice tools as well. Somebody I'm sure is going to remember that, and they'll type that in there. I'll think of it in a few minutes. But this is a very basic one. And so this is a dry piece of clay. I've applied the underglaze, and I can use this tool to carve designs into the surface. Now, I can do this while it's dry and carve through. The risk that you take when you're carving through a surface that's really dry is you can get some chipping along the edges. The advantage to carving through dry is you don't have to worry about the dust or the shavings on here from sticking to damp color. But if I encountered that I was having a lot of issues with the color chipping along the edges, what I can do is I can just take a brush with a little water and I can brush it over an area and just let that sit and wait for that really shiny, wet look to go away. And then I can carve into it. And it's already starting along the edges here where the shiny, wet look is gone. You can see that there, where here it's still real shiny and wet. Once it gets to that duller stage, I can go in and I can then carve in there, and it kind of softens that underglaze so I don't have to worry about the uh, color potentially chipping along the edges. But I'm not really having that issue. But sometimes people will have that issue, or they just don't like how hard they have to press into the piece. This is a pretty thick slab of clay that I'm working with. And so I'm not too worried about the pressure that I have to apply. If I have areas where the carving didn't go all the way through, I can go back and I can recarve those areas. Now, you don't want to, you'll see that I'm brushing this away. This particular tool has a brush on the end versus blowing it away. You don't want that dust and stuff to get airborne. So that's why I generally use the brush to brush that away. Now over here, the color is still damp. And as I carve into this, it's a lot easier carving into it. But if that surface where it's still wet and shiny, if those shavings get into it, then they tend to want to stick. So you generally want to try to get an even application of water over the top of that so that it's a little bit softer. It softens the underglaze and can be carved into. Now I can go back and I can create designs within these areas. And this was the piece that last night I put in the kiln and I fired and the piece popped in the kiln and got pieces all over. But what I did is I just went back and I carved little spots like this into the surface, and I can leave it that way. And when this is glazed with clear glaze and fired, I'll get a very rich, shiny black like you see on this side of the tile. If I don't clear glaze it, I get this more grayish finish versus the nice glossy finish. So you can do sgraffito work, any type of design work and things through and carving through like that. Now, my tile that I put the color on to show you this is drying here. And I'm just going to avoid putting my second or third coat on here so that this dries a little bit quicker, but I can go and I can carve into this. And so this still has some shiny wet areas, but we're going to just pretend that those aren't there, because then I can go and I can carve through this design, and look what happens when I carve through. Those colors that are in the background are there, and it's kind of like scratch art or engraving art. And as I carve that black layer away, it reveals whatever colors I have underneath. It's going to wipe my tool off here. Whoops, got part of the paper towel ripped off with it. But I can take and do any type of line work on here as well. And I can go and just scratch lots of lines within these areas. And this is where you have to be careful, and you want that color to not be really wet. A lot of times the color will build up here, but a lot of times you'll get little chunks of it that will fall off on the side. And if that color is too wet, it's going to embed. Now, same thing with this. If you do underglaze over the surface and you want it to be decorative, you don't have to clear glaze it. But if you apply clear glaze over the top, you can see on the side by my thumb here how glossy that is. If you're using a dinnerware safe finish of a clear glaze and you're firing it properly, these surfaces would be safe for dinnerware. If you leave it porous, like the side that's more gray, that is not going to be safe for coming into contact with food. All right. And I think I've seen a couple questions pop up. If you guys have questions, please try to save them until the end. I've got a lot to cover here, and then I'll try to get back to those questions. All right. So that's just very simple sgraffito. I could do that background with one solid color. I can do it with multiple colors like that. I could use as many colors as I want. I only really need one coat in the background of the color and then 2 to 3 coats of the black over the top or whatever color I want to use on top. It doesn't have to be black. What I like about black is those colors in the background really pop when you do carvings into it. And I can do, simple lines. I can do little curly cues. You can really do any type of carving into those finishes. So I'm going to set these aside. All right. So that's kind of the basics of fundamental underglazes. Now tonight during the live, I'm going to show you how to do banding methods using the fundamental underglazes. Get my dust out of the way here. And we'll show you some more things that you can do with fundamentals. Let me put these aside here. Now I want to go to designer liner. And designer liner is a very unique product. This too is also colored clay or colored slip. And so people always ask, well, like, what's the difference between that and fundamentals? Designer liner comes in 10 different colors, and it comes in a squeeze bottle with a metal tip. And I want to show you how, when you get a brand new bottle of color, how to use this color. And I just did a workshop last week, and this process of prepping the bottle is so important. First of all, you want to really shake that product and get it mixed up well. And there is a little plastic cap on the bottle that can be removed. I usually stick that back into the bag that has the instructions. We know a lot of times people don't read instructions, and that's why these videos are helpful, because a lot of times hearing it versus actually reading about it is easier for a lot of people. There's another little plastic bag, and inside that plastic bag, there is a pin. And you want to just take and poke that pin through the plastic bag. If you take that pin out of the bag to put in this tip after, a lot of times when you take that pin out, you put it on the table, and if you work like I do, you've got a lot of stuff usually going on, and that pin could easily get lost. If you put it in the plastic bag like that and poke it through, that bag is attached to it, and it's a lot easier to find the pin later. If you lose that bag or forget to do it, you can put a piece of masking tape on the pin, whatever, just so that that pin isn't all by itself. Now, the tip of this writer tip is sealed. So no matter how hard I squeeze this, I'm not going to get any color out of that bottle. There is this little metal writer tip that comes in with the package. And what you want to do is you want to take and you want to pierce that through the top. This is where a lot of people make a mistake with designer liner, is they pull that out and they screw the top on and they try to use it with that little tiny hole in there. Last week, I had some people were using the pin to poke the hole in the top of the bottle. And that hole with the pin or just the very tip of this puts a really small hole in there. And you'll be able to get color out, but you're going to have to squeeze a whole lot harder than if you take that tip. And once you've pushed it through, I take my thumb, kind of rest it in my hand, and I take my thumb and I give it an extra little push. And it opens that tip up a lot wider. If you don't give it that extra little push, you're going to have a hard time getting that color out of the bottle. And so when people say, oh, I have a hard time, I can't get that color to come out of the bottle, a lot of times it's because the hole in the top of that plastic isn't big enough. And no matter how much I stress this in workshops, I go around and people are like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. And I say, okay, show me how you did that. And when they say, I just poked the pin, and I'm like, nope, you need to poke that. And I just show how to do that further. That little metal tip is threaded. So when you place that on the top of the bottle, it screws on. so it's nice and snug. Now, you've already shaken this up before you put the tip on, or if the tip is on there, you're going to either plug that or put the pin into the tip. Anytime you're not using the color, you want to take and put that pin into the tip of that bottle. And that can be tricky. If I just sit here and try to poke that tip in, it can be a challenge. What I usually do is I put my finger on the tip of the bottle, and then I can take and slide that pin right across the top of my finger right into the bottle. So anytime you're not using it, pin goes back in the bottle. Even if it's 5 minutes sitting out, this is colored clay. And if you have just a little bit in that tip of the bottle and the air gets to it, it's going to dry that color up. And then you're going to struggle to get the color out, and you got to put the pin in there and clean it out. So whenever you're not using it, put the pin in. When you are going to use it, pull the pin out. You've already shaken that color up. And what I do is I usually give it a couple little shakes like this. And I'm kind of shaking it downward. And I'm putting this between my project and where I'm shaking this, because sometimes you'll get a little color will come out. And I will give it a gentle squeeze and make sure that the color is coming out. And the reason I do that is because sometimes you get a little air in the top of this, and if you don't give it that shake and you don't squeeze a little color out, you go to work on your piece and it goes, and it kind of sprays the color out. So anytime you turn it back upright, you want to do that shake. You want to give it just a little squeeze to make sure there isn't any air in there. And then you're ready to use the designer liner. Now, I'm purposely doing it over the top of this fundamental underglaze because a lot of times you may find yourself using designer liner over the top of other underglazes. And one of the common mistakes that people make, and I'm going to turn this to its side, is they will use that Writer bottle straight up and down, and they scrape it on the surface. Well, look what happens when I do that. I have orange and red underglaze on the tip of my bottle. And guess what's going to happen? It's going to plug up that tip. So I'm going to clean that color off of there. I'm going to see if the color will come out. Sometimes, yeah, the color's still coming out. But that is a really common mistake, that people use the bottle straight up and down and they scrape into the surface. Even if there is an underglaze or another color product on that surface, I always tell people if you can do it at an angle instead of straight up and down, and always try to pull toward yourself. So I've got this piece, I'm going to set it back down here, and my bottle is an angle. It's not straight up and down, it's at an angle, and I'm going to take and I'm going to start squeezing, and I pull toward myself. I may get some of that underglaze building up on that tip, but guess what? It's not getting forced into the tip. If you push away from yourself, okay, and when I say this, it's always easier to show it. I'm holding the bottle at an angle and I'm pulling toward myself versus at an angle pushing away, because when I push away, it scrapes on that surface and it wants to plug up that tip. Now, if that tip gets plugged up, you can usually take away any color that's on the outside, put that pin back in and open that up. Designer liner is designed for fine line detailing. It is not a dimensional product. People try to put this product on really heavy. Okay. If I do that, I can guarantee that color is going to fall off either before firing or during firing. And why does that happen? Okay. Think about what this product is. This is colored slip. It's colored clay. It's very concentrated versus fundamentals. The main difference is fundamentals are colored clay. This has a lot more pigment in it, so it makes it really highly pigmented color. So when I squeeze it on real heavy like that, the reason it's going to crack as it dries or crack and fall off during firing is because that slip. The surface I'm using this on is bisque, or it's dry clay that has already shrunk. So when this wants to dry, it's going to shrink, it's going to pull back, and it's going to curl up on the edges, and it's going to flake, and it's going to fall off. And some people are like, it was fine before I put it in the kiln, and during firing, it flaked and fell off. Well, guess what? This tile, especially with low fire pieces, this tile is bisque. It has already shrunk from the clay stage. It's already done its shrinking during firing. This is wet clay that's going to dry and shrink And then as it's fired, it's going to shrink more. And that's why a lot of times it'll pop off during the firing process. It might look okay before. So don't try to make this puffy and dimensional. Mayco does make another product for the low fire market called French Dimensions. And these are a fritted, a glaze-based product that are designed for making dimensional designs. And I'm not going to get into the French Dimensions here because it's not technically an underglaze product. So designer liner is great for doing real fine, intricate work. Like this piece was done doing lots of different dot designs. This one was done doing for like the wreath. I just took and did a wiggle motion back and forth like this in a circle. And what I did as I did this technique is I kept turning the tile, and I'm going side to side with this, but the bottle is also at an angle. And so I can create a wreath, and that piece will turn with me so that I'm not pushing it, but I'm always holding it at an angle while I do that. If you do dot designs, and I did plug this tip up a little bit with color while I was doing that. If I do dot designs, I can do dots, lots and lots of dots. I can do things like little comma strokes by squeezing out a little bit of color and then kind of pulling it toward the middle if I want to do a little flower design. But on these two, you want to be careful. You don't want to get these really heavy and thick because as they dry and as they're fired, they will tend to want to crack and fall off. So you can do intricate designs like this. They're also great for things like lettering. And I'm going to do this because I'm going kind of up and down. I'm holding the bottle, even though I'm going kind of away from myself, I've got it at its side so that tip isn't sliding into the color, or I try to hold it slightly above the surface as I do that. So with designer liner, if you have trouble where the color doesn't want to come out and it's a new bottle of color, and you're having trouble getting the color out, you probably don't have the hole through the top of that big enough. Put that tip back in there and clean that out. If you still encounter trouble and you're like, I know that hole is big enough, I can't get the color out, then what you want to do is you want to take that plastic cap off and squeeze out some of that color. And if it comes out of the bottle real easily, you're good. Sometimes after these colors sit for a long period of time, you can get a little bit of thick clay up in the tip of this. And so sometimes just taking that off and squeezing it out, you may find that you have a little bit of thick slip or clay up in the top of here that you need to get out, and then the color underneath that is fine. You also want to always make sure that that pin goes through there freely. If I squeeze the color out of here and it's fine, then sometimes I'll just double check. I'll turn this around the other way, and I'll kind of put that pin in there and go around and around like this just to make sure there isn't a lump of clay that got stuck in from that side. Generally, if I use these designer liner colors somewhat frequently, meaning every couple weeks, once a month, I usually store these with the pin in the bottle standing up in a tray. If you're not going to use them for a long time, say they might sit for a couple months without using them, then you want to remove that metal tip, wash that out, put that white cap back on the top of this. Will protect it a little bit more and prevent it from drying out, but pin always in there if you're going to leave it with a pin in that container. Just show you another sample here. This was an egg that I had done with designer liner, doing all kinds of design work on here. You can also use designer liner with a brush. And so I can take a brush, and I know I just knocked a brush off of the table here that I had intended to use for this, but I'm going to grab a script liner. I can take, I'm going to just scoop up some of this thick green here. I can use this with a brush, and if I want to do lines of color, I can also use a brush with designer liner. It will generally give you pretty opaque coverage because they are so concentrated with color. So if I want to do outlining and things, designer liner are a great option for that. If you work with silk screens at all, designer liner is a great option to mix with something like silk screen medium to use and to thicken that color a little bit. To use with the silk screens where you're rubbing the color in or using a squeegee to go over the top of the silk screens to do that technique. Um, if you want to mark the bottoms of your pieces, which I usually don't, but if you've got people that you need to know whose is whose, or you want to put your signature or something on the bottom, designer liner is a great option because you can use that on the bottom of pieces that, even on stoneware, because it is colored clay. Designer liner generally doesn't stick to shelves. And so I can always sign the bottoms of my pieces. If it's something like, say, you're in a paint your own pottery studio and you're dipping those pieces in a clear glaze, designer liner is a great way to have your customers mark the bottoms of their pieces with their names and things, whether it's going to be glazed or not, depending on the market that you're serving. And that brings me to on-gobe and kind of explaining the difference with on-gobe and where you would use on-gobe versus underglaze. So on-gobe is also a clay-based product. And Mayco came out with on-gobes a few years ago. They first introduced them. And there was a lot of confusion with people because they're like, well, what's the difference between that and an underglaze? And the easy way for me to explain it, and I am not a chemical engineer that says, well, here's what's in this product. When our chemical engineers start talking, sometimes it's like Charlie Brown talk. But my understanding is, so fundamental underglaze, as I mentioned earlier, these were one of the original products that Mayco came out with. And these are colored slip. Mayco came into the market doing low fire. And so these were originally designed for low fire. Now, they can also be used with stoneware temperatures and high fire temperatures, but they were basically made with like a lower fire clay body that worked well with the earthenware pieces. The on-gobes are made for stoneware. These only work on stoneware temperatures. They don't work on earthenware temperatures. And they can go to higher temperatures. And things like the black do not flux like the black underglaze can do. And so this jet black, if you use this on the bottom of pieces and you fire them to stoneware temperatures, a lot of times this will stick a little bit to the shelf, where the on-gobes don't stick to a kiln wash shelf. Now, on-gobes on the bottom of pieces, we recommend only 2 coats of it on the bottom. You can do up to 3 coats on the rest of the piece, but 2 coats is all that we recommend on the bottom. And, test your kiln wash. We've tested it with lots of different brands of kiln wash and found that it does not stick. But I know there are people out there that make their own kiln wash. So before you fire a whole load of everything with on-gobe on the bottom, test it, test a couple pieces just to be sure. Too thick of an application, we did find that it started sticking to some kiln washes in the kiln. So I love the look of on-gobe because I can have finished looks to the bottoms of my pieces. It fires out without a glaze over the top. It fires out porous, kind of like an underglaze. Now, both of these, you can also polish and burnish if you want a smoother finish. And I find with the on-gobes that you almost get, it almost feels like a matte glaze when you really polish them or burnish them. But they will fire out more of a matte, dull, underglaze type finish. This tile shows, this is the on-gobe, and I did polish this. And a lot of times you can feel the difference. And so the front of this I polished, the back of it I didn't. And so when people feel the front and they feel the back, they're like, oh yeah, I can definitely feel the difference between a polished. This is with clear glaze over it. So on-gobes are just like underglazes, that they generally get brighter. This here, I had put some texture in this tile. This was done with the terracotta on-gobe, and I fired it and then I used the white engobe, brushed a coat on, wiped it back with a sponge, revealing the texture. So you can do combinations like that with the engobes as well. This piece here was done using the engobe, and the back side of it I didn't glaze. The front side of this is the terracotta engobe, and I use the Mayco silk screens, the leaf silk screens, with black easy stroke with silkscreen medium to thicken the easy stroke underglaze, rubbed it through the silk screens, and then I speckled this with a stiff fan brush, and I'll show you that in a few minutes how to do that, using the easy stroke as well. And because the easy strokes are so concentrated with color, you get these nice rich colors with your silkscreen designs and nice crisp lines with them as well. And this then had a clear glaze put over the top to finish that piece. This piece here, this little vase, this was one that I did. Milk glass is one of the stoneware glazes over the top textured area. And on the bottom, I did a horsehair firing with this. So if you're looking for like a terracige type finish, but you want color, the engobe colors work really great for horsehair firing on stoneware pieces. I take them up to about 1,000 degrees and pull them out of the kiln and touch the horsehair to it to get that type of a finish. All right, let me set these aside. I want to move on then to easy strokes. And what is the difference then between easy stroke and fundamentals and designer liner and engobe? Okay. All three of these products over here, I'm going to put the easy stroke to the side. These are all a clay-based product. They have slip and clay in the formula of those. Easy stroke is basically pure pigment that's made into a liquid form that makes it brushable, makes it adhere to the pieces, and it will give you more of a translucent finish because it's not clay-based, it's not slip. And so these have so many different uses. And these products Mayco acquired when they acquired some of the Duncan products. And in the traditional ceramic market, in the low fire market, where Duncan had introduced these many years ago, most people use them for brush stroke work and things like that. And there's so many other uses that I want to talk to you guys about today. So I just took a workshop a few days ago in Las Vegas with the IAC, used to be the IED CCT. And this was a workshop that one of the instructors did, and it was using all easy strokes. And on the background, we used a fan brush to kind of streak the easy stroke on the background. And look at how you get kind of that watercolor sky effect on the background of that piece. We had put little Cricut stickers on here to block out the areas where the snowflakes were. And then we did some different techniques with pouncing easy stroke and layering easy stroke and outlining and doing different things on this piece. And so you can do a lot of design work or watercolor techniques. I've had some watercolor artists that love working with watercolor, and I was like, basically easy stroke, think of it like a liquid watercolor, but it's for ceramics and can be used on ceramics. I did another workshop out in Vegas, and this is a stoneware piece that I had done with Larry, and we used the snow gems, and then we tinted the snow gems with easy stroke, and then we used easy stroke over the top of it to do some coloring. So this piece I put in the kiln last night to fire, and I've got some of my kilns are in an indoor-outdoor raku area where it's very cold. And we've had like 20 below zero temperatures here, and that's not even with the wind chill. And so my poor kilns out there, when you have negative temperatures, when you try to fire the kiln, it's like, I don't understand, it just freaks out. And so I had started the kiln last night and expected it would be done this morning. The kiln was beeping this morning that it got up to about 100 degrees and then was like, something isn't right here. And so the kiln shut down. But I'm going to fire this piece, and you'll get nice bright colors with these leaves. We used oranges and yellows and reds on those as well. When it got up to about 100 degrees, the colors kind of get a little bit darker. But this is an example of the Easy Stroke on top of the snow gems doing tinting. The snow gems are white, and you can use Easy Strokes to either mix in with them or actually use color on top. So things like the snow gems, fired snow, other products, the Easy Strokes are great for tinting or adding color because, and the reason you can use them on top of things like the snow gems is because the color is pigment. It is not clay. Where if I put 3 coats of fundamental underglaze on top of another glaze, what do you think would happen? So think about this is colored slip. If I put that on top of a gloss fritted glaze that's shiny, this fires out dull and porous. On top of a glaze, a lot of times you'll either get this will bubble or it can be real porous and rough because you're putting coats of clay on top of a glossy fritted glaze surface. So I want to show you a few other things here with Easy Strokes, and then I'll demonstrate a few things. This was another piece that was in the kiln last night where that piece blew up. And I wanted to show on here using Easy Strokes, like how you can blend them. So I did red and I did some orange here and blended those colors together. Then I took and I did stripes over the top. So things like creating a plaid design, you see the translucency of that color because it's not made with clay. I did a little streak of brown here. I did some yellow to show that, yes, you will see the yellow, but the red kind of overpowered that underneath. This side, I just watered the color down so there was hardly any color and it was mostly water. And you can see the variation of how I can get a nice rich red over here when I use the color straight versus really diluting it with a lot of water. And this little piece of wheat down the middle was just using a liner brush and just doing lots of fine little strokes coming out using the French brown over the top. The little white chunks, yep, that's the piece that blew up in the kiln and stuck to all of the surfaces in there. So Easy Strokes, you get more of a translucent effect with those versus the Fundamentals and Designer Liner where they are clay-based. This was another example. I did a live last month, and this was showing the difference between using stroke and coat. And a lot of people think that stroke and coat is an underglaze, and stroke and coat is not an underglaze. At one point, Mayco, when they introduced it, it was introduced to the paint your own pottery market, and it was had a tagline of Wonder Glaze. And so a lot of people got confused by that and thought it meant it was an underglaze. It's not. Stroke and coat is a fritted glaze. So it is a gloss glaze where Easy Stroke is just pigment. And look at the difference here. I did this plate for one of my other lives. Look at how intense the Easy Stroke colors are applying one coat versus Stroke and Coat. And Stroke and Coat is a great product, but look at how much more pigment these have in them and how bright and vibrant they come out. The Designer Liner I had shown here, using it doing kind of a stippling technique over the top of the silk screen, just tapping in little dots of color to do my background in there so that the black would show through from the lines. This was using Easy Stroke with cheesecloth over the top of a matte glaze. This is a low fire technique. You can do the same technique with high fire glazes. And the reason this works, and you can put Easy Stroke over the top of other glazes, so you can create like Myolica techniques, where you've got your 3 coats of your base glaze, and then you do Easy Stroke over the top of it. Because Easy Stroke isn't colored clay, it's just pigment. When that glaze is fired and that glaze softens, that Easy Stroke color just like, I don't want to say soaks in, but it becomes part of that glaze and gives you a nice smooth surface. And this one is a matte glaze. A gloss glaze would give you a shinier surface. So on here, I put cheesecloth in the top coat of the glaze while it was still wet. Let that kind of dry to the damp stage. I sponged Easy Stroke different colors over the top of this piece and then peeled the cheesecloth away and fired it. And the piece is nice and smooth, um, and kind of a cool way to use the easy strokes as well. Last month, I also showed the watercolor technique where we dilute the easy stroke colors to make them like watercolor and we drip and let them run on the pieces. This piece is stoneware. This was done using different shades of blues in the easy stroke line on the bottom. And then the white lines are designer liner. So designer liner can go up to the stoneware temperatures. This was fired to cone 6. And you get a very soft, satiny finish with easy strokes on stoneware taken up to cone 6. And the designer liner, I didn't put it on too thick, so I didn't get any of it peeling or popping off of the piece. The top of this was done with sapphire blue stoneware glaze. There's also mother of pearl and fired gold on this piece. But the bottom, that's all easy stroke and designer liner. If you missed that live, we did find out that for some reason Facebook is deleting the videos, and we found out after 30 days now they are deleting them. But we did save the recordings for the last live, and we're going to get those posted to our YouTube page, so that you guys can see those as well. One of the really cool things that you can do with Easy Stroke is you can create your own translucent glazes. And all these tiles that I have out here, with the exception of this one that I just pulled out and I'll talk about in a minute, these are all done taking clear glaze and adding a little bit of Easy Stroke to the clear glaze. So if I want to do that, depending how much I need, when I did these little tiles, I put enough clear glaze of what I thought I would need to get 2 coats on these tiles. And I took my Easy Stroke. I'm going to grab a color here that should show up well. I'm going to grab the midnight blue because that one should show up really well. And I can take that clear glaze and I can add just a drop of Easy Stroke into this clear glaze. And I'm going to take a brush handle and stir this up. And because these colors are so highly pigmented, that little drop is going to give me now a translucent glaze that has a blue tint to it. And this is what I got when that fired out. And so if I wanted a lighter blue, I can add more clear glaze. Don't add as much Easy Stroke. This bowl was one that we did with the watercolor technique using pinks and blues. And yes, some of those pinks, even at higher temperatures, the rose does fire out really well at cone 6. And there are some purples too that have some purple tint to them. But on the inside of this bowl, I did 2 coats of a mixture like this on the inside of the bowl. I diluted it a little bit more so there wasn't as much color. And then I just took and I added some color at the top, and you can kind of see the drips. And I purposely did that so you could see that on a smooth surface, when you make a translucent glaze like these using Easy Strokes, on a smooth surface, if you don't get the application real even, it's going to come out streaky. It's not an opaque glaze. These work best on things with texture like this, my little taco holder. This was just a slab of clay that was rolled out. And when you've got texture like this, that color kind of puddles and really accentuates the texture on those pieces. And so these were all, I mean, look at these bright oranges, reds. You'll even get these at cone 6. A lot of these colors do really well at the higher temperatures. These are all these tiles are done to 06, but the pinks, the purples, the turquoise colors. This was the yellow. There's a chartreuse. This is the rose pink. This is the lilac. So you can create your own glazes and you can make them as intense or as pastel and translucent as you want. Set those aside here. Now this tile is showing using the color as a wash. And that's one of the other things that are really nice about the Easy Strokes is because they are translucent. So if I have something textured like this, I can take a little bit of this color, and I'm just going to squeeze some of this out onto my tile. And I can take, whoops, add some water to this, and I'm adding a generous amount of water because these colors are so intense. And I can turn this into basically watercolor, and I can take and brush this over the top of this tile, over this textured surface. And that was just a drop of color that I diluted with water. And look at how intense that still is. I can then take a sponge and I can wipe that back to bring out the highlights on the piece. Now, the difference between doing this and making a translucent glaze is when you use an easy stroke like this as a wash and you wipe it back, you get white on the surface or whatever color your clay body is versus everything being blue, but more intense color in the crevices where that color kind of puddles. And this isn't a clear glaze that runs and flows. That is just the natural brushing that glaze on. It puddles in textures and you get those areas where it picks up. Where on a smooth surface, it's going to be a little bit streakier if your application isn't as even. So there's different ways to use them to get kind of the same effect, but this, making your own translucent glaze or sheer glaze, is going to give you that blue over everything. Doing this type of a technique, you're wiping it back to the natural clay body. All right. Um, I have a couple other things to show, and then we're gonna open it up to questions here. I always try to keep this to about an hour. Another thing that you can do with easy strokes is these were glazed tiles. And if you have a glazed surface or you want to do a quick project, you can use easy strokes almost like China paint. I did this one, I used a stencil and just sponged the color over the stencil. So this was a glossy, shiny tile that you get at the hardware store or Lowe's or Home Depot. You can use easy stroke on top of it. Now, you have to experiment with those colors. And I suggest firing a couple tiles to see how heavy you can put that color on there. Because sometimes the easy stroke will come out more matte. Sometimes the glaze that's used on that tile will fire out more matte as well. Some people will spray the surface with hairspray to dull the surface. It makes the color grab a little bit better. But this was using the colors straight with a brush right on the tile. And I can do brush strokes really easily, and I'm just going to do it right on my glazed tile here. I'm going to take, well, if I can get it, there we go. Bottle's getting kind of empty. I can take, we're going to take red and the blue together because that will show up well. I can take and load this brush up with the red, and I can just take and tip it with the blue, and I can do things. And this is what easy strokes were originally probably used the most, was doing brushstroke designs. If I want more blue, I can pick up a little bit more blue in those brush strokes. And this is on a glazed surface, and look at how well that color sticks because it's so highly pigmented. Now this, having it on that thick, is going to give you a little bit more of a matte finish with it. You may end up going back and adding a clear glaze. So always test the tiles. The different manufacturers' tiles are going to give you different results. There's no guarantee of exactly what you're going to necessarily get. I wanted to show you guys the splattering technique real quickly. So when I do the splattering technique, I use a stiff bristled fan brush and I pick up some slightly diluted color, and then I will take that fan brush and just kind of flick it back at the surface. And easy strokes are great. Oops, get it under the camera here. Are great for that type of a technique, for getting a splatter technique. And because they're so highly pigmented, you get nice speckles of color showing up. Where if you did that same technique with fundamental underglaze, they're not as intense with color. You may not see the speckles as well. Designer liner also works good for doing speckling techniques too. You can use easy strokes for coloring slip. And I have just a little cup of slip here, whether it's a stoneware slip, a porcelain slip, um, a um, whatever type of slip you have. I can take and add a little bit of that easy stroke, and I can mix that in with the slip. Now, depending on the color of the slip itself, a lot of times you won't see how deep that color really is. You're not going to see a bright blue slip necessarily. I mean, I can take a lot of this color and add it and get this more blue, but a little bit of color is going to go a long way in tinting the slip. So I recommend with this as well, you want to play around. And what I would do with this is I would take a little bit of this with a palette knife. I would put some drops of it on the outside of a mold or on a piece of plaster. I would let that little disc dry and I would fire that and see how bright it comes out with a clear glaze on it, without a clear glaze. And you can use this to cast molds or do different types of slip techniques as well. Last thing I want to show you is coloring clay. If I want to color some actual moist clay, I can take that underglaze and I can put this on the clay and wedge it and knead it with my hands, or I can take and put it in a bag. And a lot of times what I'll do is I will try to fold this clay kind of over on itself to kind of embed that clay into the color. And then I'll stick it in a plastic bag and I will work it this way to get that color worked into that clay. Now you can completely mix it into the clay, or you can create a really cool marbleized effect. So I might put some of this blue in here and squish this clay around and get it marbled into that clay a little bit. And then I can take another color, find one here that'll show up. Orange might show up in there. And I can take and squirt some of that into the bag and then kind of wedge and knead that in as well. And so I do it in the bag just because my hands then aren't solid blue or orange or whatever color I'm working with. And I can take that clay, roll it out into a slab, and make cool bowls. This was done with a white stoneware clay body using different colors, and look at that cool marbleized effect that you get with the easy stroke underglazes just mixed in with clay. All right. I know we covered a lot. I'm going to open it up to questions, and then we're going to pick the winner. I'm going to flip the camera back up here. So if you guys have questions at this point, now is the time to ask. I'm going to spin the wheel here to get a winner. Now, if I call somebody's name as a winner and they are not here, we will draw for another winner. So if I call your name, you need to let us know, type in that you are here. And then what I'll have you do is you can either private message Mayco Colors or send me a message with your shipping information. Again, if you're from another country outside the US, we'll get you a certificate that you can use with a supplier. So the person that has won is Sarah Christian. Oh, where did it go? Sarah Christian, I think it was Williams. It just disappeared. If you're in here, Sarah, let us know that you are here. And I'm watching now to see if there are questions that come up, and I'll try to answer those questions. If I don't get to your questions, or you asked a question earlier and I wasn't watching for questions earlier, I will try to go in and answer these questions. While I'm waiting for Sarah to respond, I will answer questions, and I want to show you guys what we're going to do tonight. What cone are you firing store-bought tiles? Good question. So the store-bought tiles, you want to find out, generally you're safe to fire them to low fire temperatures, but you don't know what that clear glaze or what that glaze is that's on the tile. So I usually start out at a lower temperature, and if I find that the glaze doesn't like the color doesn't kind of penetrate into the glaze in the firing, I'll usually take it higher. A lot of times in the stores, they will say if they are a porcelain tile, which then I know I can take up to cone 6. And that's where you really need to experiment and see how hot they can go. But usually the low fire tiles, I fire to an 06. If I'm doing stoneware tiles or porcelain tiles, I usually start out at cone 6 and see if I can take those higher. How did you burnish polish the engobe? So when I burnish or polish the engobe, some people will use a wooden spoon, some people will use a polished stone. What I like to use is I buy the chamois material from the Dollar Tree. They use it like for, it's usually by like the automotive stuff for like wiping off your car, drying your car when you're washing it. It's usually an orange sheet. There was a chamois material, I think that was like a blue material. I like to use that because it's durable and I can take little pieces and I just rub in a circular motion and you will see instantly where that color starts to polish. Usually I do it when the color is still damp but not shiny wet, and I do that polishing or that burnishing. Will the Duncan Easy Stroke work with Cone 10 clay? It will. And on the Mayco website, we show all of the colors fired to 06, cone 6, and cone 10. Some of the colors will burn out at cone 10. Some of the pinks and purples, you're going to lose that color, but a lot of them do well all the way up to cone 10. All right. Sorry, there's questions popping in. If your designer liner has dried out, can it be recovered? You know, if you add water to it, it's going to soften it. And you can try it. Generally, if I have colors that dry up, I don't spend the time to do it. I know a lot of people do. Sometimes with glazes, you can get crawling and things happen. And I generally discourage. If they're thick, you can add distilled water to them. But if they are dried up to a brick, they may not perform properly if you get them back to liquid form. Easy stroke without dull. Yes, that is correct, Gina. Using Easy Stroke and clear glaze and watercolor effect, can I dilute the water or only clear? Can I dilute with water or only clear glaze? Generally, you want to dilute with clear glaze. If you start adding water to the clear glaze, you're now thinning out the glaze, and what a glaze that would normally take 2 coats now may not give you a glossy finish. So I would generally add more clear glaze to it. Or let's say you mixed it up and the color was too dark and you wanted to thin that out or make it more diluted, I would just pour a little bit of that into a cup, add a little bit more clear glaze, so you don't have to add too much clear glaze and end up with a gallon of a color that you'll never use. And I'm not seeing that. I forgot to even write down the name of the person. Has anybody seen the person that I announced comment that they are here? I'm just going to look at the most recent comments. If anybody saw her comment, I'm not seeing it. If she did, and I find out after that she did, I will. I'm just gonna spin and do another name and remember to write it down here. Let me do that quick and then I'll get back to the questions here. Donna McLean, if you are still here, I'm going to write your name down so I don't forget. If you're here, let us know that you're here. And I'm going to go back to the questions here. Oh, somebody said she did answer. Okay, I will go back in. I apologize. Donna, if you're here, I'll send you a set too. All right. Just looking at the other questions here. Scrolling back to all the other comments. Easy stroke, clear glaze, cone 6. Easy stroke and clear glaze, cone 6. Yes, you can do easy stroke with the cone 6 clear glazes and get the colors too. But if you go to the Mayco website and you see that a particular easy stroke color burns out at cone 6, it's going to burn out in a clear glaze as well, usually. Yeah, somebody commented they never thought about doing that with clear glaze. And, last year Mako discontinued in the um, foundations line. We discontinued a few of the sheer colors that didn't sell well. And of course, there were people out there that love those colors. And so this is a great way that you can make any sheer colors that you want. Um, Somebody repeat about horsehair instructions. So that is a whole separate conversation. But basically, once those pieces are fired to cone, whatever you're firing them to, that particular piece of stoneware, I put it back in the kiln, heated it to 1,000 to 900 to 1,000 degrees. You pull them out with tongs, you touch the horsehair to it, and the horsehair burns and leaves a carbon line on the piece. I have done some lives on that, and I'm going to be reshooting some videos on that technique as well. If you're in clay share, I did horsehair firing, I believe, last year for Clay Share Con. There should be a recording there of it as well. What underglaze? I'm making tiles that, sorry, these are going by really fast and I'm losing them. Someone asked if you can use Easy Stroke on white engobe. Yes, you can use Easy Strokes on top of engobes. Use Fundamentals Jet Black on silkscreen over Raspberry Mist and Lavender Mist. Am I to understand that it will cause bubbling, blistering? So using something like a Fundamental Underglaze on a silkscreen, you're adding a very thin application of the color. Sometimes it will work, but anytime you use, just think about what the product is. If you're putting clay over the top of a fritted product and you put a heavy application of that on there, there's a good chance that the glaze could bubble or you'll get a rough surface where that is. When you're using the silk screens, you're putting such a thin application on that you probably will get away with it and it will kind of penetrate into the glaze. But if you feel any porousness or roughness to it after, it's probably not going to be safe to be used with food if you do that. Yeah, Easy Strokes. If your supplier doesn't carry the Easy Strokes, talk to them. Any Mako distributor can get them. Not everybody carries them because they don't understand all the benefits to them. So talk to your supplier and let them know that you want Easy Strokes. They have to order only 3 of each color. So if you want all 3 colors, let them know. I'll buy all 3, or get your friends to buy them to bring them in. But we're going to be really showing you guys a lot of techniques coming up of different ways to use silk screens as well. Use Fundamentals Jet Black. Oh, that was the screen. Okay. Cause bubbling. I did answer that. All right. I think I've got most of the questions. Again, if I didn't, I'll go back through this and I'll answer and I'll respond in there. I want to show you what we're going to do tonight. So tonight, I'm going to talk about airbrushing with Easy Strokes. We're going to demonstrate that. We'll do banding using things like designer liner. I'm going to show how to do this. We're going to do banding using Easy Strokes, doing things like this. This is also done using Easy Strokes, but adding little tree designs to the piece. This is done banding, doing very defined sections of different colors and fine lines. This is using fundamentals, doing defined areas. This is blending fundamentals and using Easy Strokes. So we'll cover that tonight, and we will also go over some other, I got other stuff here too that we'll go over tonight with underglazes as well. So that one tonight is at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And again, we'll be giving away some prizes tonight. And I hope you guys can join us. If you can't, that also will be recorded and will be available at the links that we've shared for 30 days, apparently. And then you'll find those on our YouTube page. So thanks for joining me this morning. And I look forward to seeing a lot of you this evening. Take care.